Good morning. I'm thrilled to be here. That was a pretty good introduction. I don't quite feel like a superstar, considering that it took me almost 45 minutes to get here. I was totally lost with our Uber driver. So I think this morning Evangeline had asked me to talk a little bit about myself, my story, why I went to law school, what inspired me to go to law school. So you've heard already two people talk about kind of the logistics of going to law school, the importance of networking. I'm probably going to talk to you a little bit about how tough it's going to be and the realities of that. And hopefully one day, if you decide to go to law school, it will inspire you to stay in law school and continue if that is in fact your dream and passion. Before I get started, by way of hand, how many people here want to go to law school because of the prestige? Oh good, that's good. Because most people are like, yay me. And how many people want to go to law school because you want to change the world and make a difference? Oh wow, okay, the idealistic people. That will soon end very quickly once you hit 40. I'm going to tell you that right now. And then probably as you get closer to 50, it will really go out the window. But it's good, because you're probably in your 20s, right? Most of you at least. So that was me too. I immigrated to this country when I was 8 years old with my mother and brother. We didn't speak any word of English. In fact, I didn't even know the ABCs. Ran into the boys' bathroom because back then they just had boys and girls and they didn't have those signs nowadays where it's half boy, half girl, like I think Target and some of the other places have. So that's where I started, 8 years old. I came here from South Korea. Nowadays I have to say South, by the way, because you know what's going on with North, right? Just want to make sure that everybody knows that. So I immigrated here from South Korea when I was 8 years old in you'll know how I am, 1980. And we settled in the city of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, as they say. There wasn't as much love for two Korean children, and then we became American citizens. There were very few Asian American families in 1980. There were some in different parts, but not enough. In fact, I only knew of 2 other children in my entire grammar school from K through 8 who were Asian. We had a great Pakistani ESL teacher. Go figure how she taught 2 kids who didn't speak a word of English. Because nowadays everyone says, wow, you speak English good. I'm like, well, thank you. 37 years, it worked. So I did have a great teacher. And one of the main reasons I became really interested in law school, I mean, besides the fact that I have a very stereotypical, type A, Asian American parents, what do you want to do, doctor or lawyer? And I didn't like blood, I hated needles, I was 8, so I chose lawyer. And then that just sort of stuck with you because you couldn't do anything else. Being Korean American, my parents were typical immigrants. They worked at and owned a 7-Eleven. They worked over 100 hours a week, probably until the day they retired at 62 and 65. So hard work was something that it's a given. And these days, if I ever complain about how I'm working 80, 90 hours a week, I will say that my mother says, but you're in an office with air conditioning. Okay, so yes. So I digress a little bit. So, you know, at 8 years old when you are, is this not working? Okay, it is, okay. At 8 years old when you are in a country where there are few people who look like you and talk like you and perhaps think like you, it's really hard. I mean, we got picked on like we got beaten, basically. And I remember one particular horrible snowstorm where a whole bunch of kids who were 4th, 5th, 6th grade and older chased us because it was fun, because you had 2 little kids who were 6 and 8 who didn't speak English. So guess what? We couldn't tell on them. So we got beaten, snowballed. It was pretty bad. And my parents were, of course, devastated, like any parent would be. And that's my first sort of, I guess, thought about the law in a more serious way. I couldn't speak up for myself, obviously. I had been there for maybe about a month. And then soon thereafter, because my father had complained about what had happened, the vice principal wanted to bring justice. He felt really bad for the 2 little Asian American kids who were 6 and 8 who got beaten, I mean, pretty badly. So the next day, of course, because my parents, if you remember, are type A, so even though we had bruises, we went to school. The vice principal took me around the entire school of I don't know how many hundreds of kids so that I can point out my attackers. So can you imagine, you're 8 years old, you've just been beaten, you now have to go and point fingers at the kids who you think beat you up. And then, forget about a social life, I mean, how are you going to make friends after that one, right? So besides the fact that I was horrified of that, the other thing is I had been in this country for a month. So every child, whether it was black, white, looked the same. I could not figure out who was who, because it was like that, right? Everything blended in together. And then it occurred to me as I was doing that, I was terrified. First, I wasn't gonna have friends. Second, I was hoping I pointed to the right kid who had beaten me and my little brother. And that kind of gave me a sense of like justice in this country, and what that meant, and how I wanted to make a difference for the next little kid who was going to get beaten, who's not going to have a voice, right? Because there wasn't somebody who was Korean, fluent, bilingual, and who can speak up for 2 small children in a new school, a new country. And then fast forward, I think I was like in my 20s, I became a social worker. So I'm still a licensed social worker. I have my master's degree in social work in New York State, because again, I was in my 20s, still idealistic, still want to change the world, and I worked for the Legal Aid Society Juvenile Rights Division, because I wanted to help kids. That was something that I was very passionate about, having been an immigrant child who's gone through all of these things. And then at that time, you know, I worked with mostly children who were sexually abused at the Legal Aid Society. That was my clinical training. And then I also worked with juvenile delinquents who abused other children sexually, and 1 homicide case. And then when I realized about the whole justice system then, the juvenile rights justice system, was just horrible. I mean, it was horrible. Kids were being sent to detention centers. It was supposed to prevent recidivism. It was supposed to help children integrate into society better, become a productive citizen. I can go on about that too, but it really wasn't helping, because ultimately those detention centers were more punitive than helpful. And then I thought, okay, I don't want to be a social worker anymore, because all I'm doing as a social worker is putting Band-Aids on a lot of issues, because it doesn't really solve the problem. So that's when I really started thinking more about law school, and whether or not I wanted to go to law school, how can I make a difference? I wanted to work on impact litigation. I wanted to work on things that could really help change the laws in this country, to help people that look like me, and certainly look like all of you here. And then, you know, I went to law school, and that itself was a very challenging process, because unlike many of the stereotypes about Asian Americans, I didn't go to an Ivy League school. My parents worked hard, but they just didn't have the financial means. So I don't know if any of you are going through this, but I actually had to apply for financial aid even to apply to law school. So the actual applications, I don't know what it's like nowadays, like 20 years ago, they actually had individual applications to all the schools, and I couldn't afford the $40 to $60 per application, so I actually had to get an application fee waiver. But I was still very determined. I really wanted to change some of the things that I had seen as a social worker, and certainly as a child in this country. So I persevered. I got a lot of financial support from the schools. They waived my application fee because I couldn't afford it. And still, you know, I couldn't afford the, what was it? It's like Princeton Review or Kaplan, or one of these things have LSAT programs. Couldn't afford that either. I studied on my own, didn't do so great. And I ended up going to I'm sure if anybody's Rutgers alumni, I'm sorry to offend anyone, but I went to a very mediocre law school. And law school itself was really tough because I actually had to work to support my education continuously. It was a state school. I was a New Jersey resident. It was, you know, you got the education you needed. There were some great professors. There were some not so great professors. And it was tough. I mean, I don't know what anyone has said throughout this whole process in terms of law school. I mean, the students in law school, I mean, half of them, if not more, are just assholes. They don't help, they don't support you, they say they do, they will take your stuff, they will not share an outline, they will sabotage you, they will do all kinds of shit that you hear about and hope that it doesn't happen to you, but it does. So I hated study groups, I hated them, because all they did was, it was a way for them to gauge what you're doing and take whatever hard work that you've had. So my experience with law school generally, I did not like it. It just didn't feed into and I'm a very competitive person, but at a school where I thought my dream was to help people, it just didn't fit me. So law school's tough because the actual work sometimes can be very demanding. And if you are working to support your education, it's even tougher. And then on top of that, you don't have the nicest people. I will say that I could probably count 5 people that I still stay in touch with because most of the people, and I don't know about all of you, but time is precious and you want to invest your time into people that you're going to be able to connect with and stay friends with for a really long time. And given the sort of the people that I saw in law school, it just wasn't my cup of tea. And then after law school, and then the whole interview process just gets even crazier. That's where the true assholes really come out. It just takes it to another level. And if you are successful, one of the things I realized is, how did she get that? What did she do? She's not even doing that great. What is she doing? It's a lot of that. So I kept to myself for most of it. Was successful enough to end with a federal magistrate judge clerkship in the District of New Jersey. Again, I don't know how I got it myself, but it worked. And afterwards, you know, I looked really hard to get a job in the nonprofit sector. This is my dream, remember, starting from 8, now going up to 28. I couldn't find a job. Even after the federal clerkship, which is, in most people's eyes, when you have a federal clerkship, it's pretty prestigious, it's hard to get, and if you decide to go to law school, you'll learn about that. But despite that, they wanted, a lot of nonprofit organizations wanted somebody with experience, and I of course did not have experience. I was clerking, and that was the only experience I had. So I struggled a bit. I was they call it now, I think, consultant or contract worker, but I was a temp at a big law firm, one of the ones that probably Bill works at, and I slaved away, I don't know, 100 hours a week doing this boring crap called document review, which a lot of first-year lawyers will do, whether you're a temp or not. And I was on some very interesting cases like Enron, WorldCom, all of those big ones. But it wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I continued doing that for about a year because I was still committed. And then, as Bill and others have mentioned, my debts just started piling up. And at some point I was thinking, okay, is this it? What do I want to do? And then I started applying for a lot of jobs. Oh my God, I had so many rejection letters. I can't even tell you. And I'm a bit of a masochist. I saved over 150 rejection letters for almost, I think I just got rid of it in 2014. So I have been out of school for a really, really long time. I saved every single rejection letter I had ever received. And I'm very tenacious, so I had over 150 or 60 at some point. I lost count, but it was in a basket in my room. I looked at those every single day to never, ever forget how hard I worked to achieve my dreams. Because not only did I work hard, starting from the moment I decided to apply, I couldn't even afford to apply. I had to get a waiver first. And the schools were generous enough to do that. Then after that, I couldn't get into the top law school, and you heard Bill talk about that a little bit. It is incredibly important that you go to the best school possible. And especially if you're a person of color, it becomes even more critical that you go to the best school possible. But financially and academically, it wasn't just in the cards for me, right? So I went to Rutgers. And even that, like 3 years of that, and you would think that I would land somewhere decent. No, didn't happen. I worked really, really hard. And there were days where I felt like, okay, this is not working out. I gotta think of a different strategy. I'm now in my 30s. This is what I told you, like you go to your 40s, you get disillusioned. So I decided, you know what? I'm gonna try a different route. I gave up my dream of doing nonprofit work because it just wasn't working. And then part of me like really struggled, like do I sell out to the private sector? What do I do? So I did. It's so much easier to find a job in the private sector. Hence I went to a big firm, and then of course the big bank, JP Morgan. And believe it or not, being open-minded, even though initially I was just so reluctant to do that, it opened a lot of doors. Because there isn't as much diversity in those big firms and big banks. It's hard, but the doors are a little bit easier than going to a nonprofit. I don't know why that is. I still haven't figured that out. But one of the ways in which I stay connected to my community and to give back was to do a lot of pro bono work. I will tell you that every single day I spent in the private sector, there wasn't a pro bono case that I didn't work on. Whether it was through the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and in New York there is an organization called MFY Legal Services. I worked on adoption cases, I worked on domestic violence cases, given my background as a social worker, the license which I still maintain even till this day. So there are opportunities. If you really believe in yourself, if you believe that this is what you are meant to do and that you want to do, you can find a way. And I think you just heard two people talk about resources. So this brings me to my current position as the president and CEO of the Minority Corporate Counsel Association. So one of the things that we're really trying to do, and by the way, you're going to hear from Gabrielle, who has done a fantastic job of pipeline work in a few minutes. We don't really focus on the pipeline as much. My belief, and when I took this role as a full-time employee, is that the top has to change. The top has not changed. So if you look at law schools, and then you go into the big law firms, or wherever you go, there's a lot of diversity. A lot meaning at least a quarter, if not more. And 20 years ago, when I was starting out, I would say there was very little diversity. So when you first start out, you're going to see a lot of people who look similar. You're not going to feel isolated. But as you move up in your careers, you're going to realize, wow, where are the people that look like me? Where are they going? You know, what's happening? It's what Bill was talking about. You don't have a book of business, you can't stay at the firm. And guess what? If you look at any of the research that's been done, and our organization does a lot of research on these things, minority partners are the first to go. And if you're an African American woman at a large law firm in this country, you're the first to go. And there isn't that much of you to start out with. So the chances of you making it as you move up becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. So, to Bill's point earlier, it's important that you network because nobody in this room is really competing for the same thing. So it's good for you to start early so that you're not waiting till later when you're competing with them for the job or whatever it is. I mean, they did some horrible shit back then where they now it's at least electronic, but they would pull down postings from the career site that will rip it out of the binders. I've heard all kinds of stories. Now it's a little bit hard for you to do that. Thank God it's electronic. But people find ways to be not as helpful. So I would say try to make friends here, friends wherever you go, as much as you can. It will help you in the long run. And for us, we focus on the top because when you have people, hopefully, that look like us, it will make a little bit of a difference. As you may have heard recently, I don't want to be too political because we are in Miami, but if you remember back in August, there were some pretty bad things that were going on in terms of diversity and what the president was doing and saying with Charlottesville and all of those things that are going on. And if you recall, it was an African-American CEO from Merck who actually took the first bold step to step down from the president's council, right? So I think you need bold leaders, and that's not to say that straight white male allies aren't there for us, right? Because we have to all work together. But you need people who understand the importance of diversity at the top to trickle it down, hopefully to law firms and to students, so that we become much more diverse and inclusive, not just in the pipeline programs, but as you move up into your careers. Because wouldn't it be great if all of you, if you wanted to be the managing partner at a big law firm like Keynote Gates or Cravath, or to become the general counsel, which is the top legal officer of a major corporation that looks like you? Wouldn't it be great if we had more than one Ursula Burns? In case you don't know who that is, she's a former CEO and the most prominent African-American woman to hold a C-suite job, right? So wouldn't it be great to have that? That is what MCCA is really working on, to create some diversity at the top. We are not doing as much on the pipeline, I have to confess, because if I have one thing I have to choose on, that's what I'm going to do. Because I'm hoping that by having more senior people at the top, they'll work together to make all of the changes that comes down sort of to the bottom, where the students are starting out. But the one thing you should keep in mind if you are going to law school is that we have a program called the LMJ Scholarship Program. We give out $10,000 to first-year law students. We just extended that to October, I'm going to forget. It's on our website, www.mcca.com. It's like October 31st, I think. There are tons of opportunities that are out there. You have to look for them. Some of it you'll hear throughout this program. That's one that MCCA has done. We've given out now over $3.2 million in scholarships. The next thing we're really trying to do with our students is to develop a program where you could all network with each other. There are a lot of very senior people who love to mentor students. So I'm going to call them to task, because this is what I hear all the time. But the moment you start a mentoring program, I don't see any of them. So the moment you say, hey, if you do a program where I can mentor students, I'm going to be there. Well, I'm going to do that, because like a ton of them during our General Counsel Summit earlier this year had talked about wanting to mentor students. So look out for the mentoring program. But the last thing I want you to also think about, if you find someone that you like and you want them to be your mentor, you have to make them work for you. So I have a student who now, well, he's not a student, he graduated. He volunteered with us. I will tell you, he does a great job of making me work for him in a way that I have not seen too many young people do. It is your job to get advice. Don't ever think that they're too busy, because if they're busy, they're old enough and big enough to say, I'm too busy. So reach out to them, ask for help, ask for advice, and if they don't respond right away, don't be discouraged, because I will tell you that the volume of emails that most of us get, I mean, I could just probably be buried for days in that, right? So give people a chance, follow up, ask your question, get the feedback and advice that you need, because most people who say that they want to help students are truly, truly genuine about that. It's just sometimes timing isn't great because they have their day jobs. So it's up to you to find a way to help your mentor be a great mentor to you, whether it's applying for law school, applying for a job, or an internship. We all have busy lives, but we also have a great network that can help and support your careers if this is something that you're truly committed to doing.